Good afternoon, everyone. It is April 10th, 3:30 p.m. Was just reviewing a couple of videos, and I was listening or reading some of the comments, and there doesn't seem to be the right description of what I feel is the correct version of what is happening due to refraction and understanding how inferior mirage is created visually. Refraction happens at a distance. We can see a mirage happen close, we can see mirage happen further in the distance, but the mechanics should all be pretty much the same. Everything that we see is illuminated by the sky, and then how light reflects off of those objects and travels to our observation point is how we interpret what things are in the world. So basically, I want to kind of show we would have a distant object here. A distant object, and both ones that are above a water line. The blue would represent a water line. We would have two different observer heights, one higher than the lower. And what I would like to show you is from the higher vantage point, light coming from this little pink section right here is all of the information for a stretch of water at a distance from us that is headed towards an observer at a higher vantage point. Okay, it's headed everywhere, but this one's headed to a higher vantage point. Now, through refraction, which is the bending of a light path to a different location, it's the angular bending of light. So this viewer is seeing a nice flat surface of water from their vantage point. But what happens now if it's refracted? Let's rotate. So if we took all of this information and rotated it down to the lower observer. So this section in pink that I had mentioned here before now is taking on a ramping up with distance presentation to the new observer, just based on refraction. The light coming off of the surface of the water that was headed towards the higher vantage point is refracted downward, back down towards the surface and down towards the lower observer. Now, this inferior mirage is not a product of light refracting upward. What you are seeing is off the surface of the water, being refracted back down to a lower vantage point, making it appear to be higher with distance from the point that it starts. And that would in turn create visual obstruction of any light that is coming off of the surface structure that's horizontal, causing visual blockage of that distant object. The visual information that is in front of it, replacing it, is overriding anything from that height of the mirage down to the surface. That is why mirages have apparent height obstruction. Now, this really explains two different scenarios. Now, you can have this object casting a reflection off of water that is smooth and producing a specular, mirror-like reflection across the surface of the water. Or if the surface of the water is undulating and disturbed, you are going to see a diffuse reflection off the water. You're going to see what appears to be waves on the water. So when this pink plane of information is refracted, you're either going to see inferior mirage or you're going to see loomed water. I mean, whatever is causing the height is, I guess, the very poorly defined looming. In all, it's the same thing. It's a refracted water line. The refracted water line can produce what people call an inferior mirroring or the inferior mirage, or inferior looming of water. Everything is just so poorly labeled as far as the mechanics on how light needs to travel in order for us to interpret what we're seeing. Now, this doesn't really need to just present itself once. If we have, at multiple distances, less and less refraction that creates a stepping of different heights, then we might end up with something, oh, it's kind of hard to see here, but this here is actually 3 different planes of water. Now, if I were to orbit this into a view, I didn't plan this out well. What you would end up seeing is something that's near horizontal and ramps of continuous progressive raising of the water line. This is where we start seeing what are called the aqua bands. You know, the aqua bands are just how the light is coming off of a certain area, the angle that it's being presented at. If you walk up to a pond, just based on your height above the pond, you can raise or lower your vantage point and pick up specular to diffuse reflections just by changing the angle that you are seeing the surface of the water. Now, you can do this up close, but what's happening with refraction is in the distance, it is being changed. That angle of presentation is being changed for you by refraction. You're just observing it from a point. I have a video called Visualizing Refraction in AutoCAD. And I can show the same effect a little bit better, but understanding the mechanics on how light is coming off the surface and what it's actually doing to get the observer is something that needs to be understood before you get to that next level. Thanks for your time.